On the edge of known space, far beyond the last mapped star, the Cathari dreadnought Iron Maw drifted like a black tooth through the void. Its hull bristled with weapon spines and hunter sigils, each one carved from the bones of conquered species. Inside, in a circular chamber lined with viewing galleries, a crowd of Cathari warriors gathered. They hissed and clicked, their scaled tails twitching with amusement. Below them, in a shallow pit lit by cold blue lamps, stood an old human man. He was thin, his skin loose over sharp bones, his white hair cropped short. His hands were bound behind his back with energy cuffs that flickered faintly. He wore a tattered gray jumpsuit stained with oil and time. His name was Elias, though no one here knew it. To the Cathari, he was just another piece of prey, weak, slow, and past his prime. They had found him alone on a dead station orbiting a frozen moon, scavenging parts from broken machines. They assumed he was the last of his kind, a relic hiding in the dark. "Look at him," growled Vrax, the warlord, from his elevated perch. His voice was rough, like stone grinding on stone. No armor, no weapon. Not even fear in his eyes. "Is he broken or stupid?" The others laughed, a dry, rattling sound. They prided themselves on being the galaxy's finest hunters. For generations, the Cathari had chased, captured, and displayed intelligent life as trophies. They believed strength was proven through dominance and dominance through the hunt. Humans, they had been told, were soft, extinct or enslaved long ago. This old man was proof, but Elias did not flinch. He stood straight, his breathing slow and even. His eyes, pale blue and sharp, scanned the room, not with panic but with quiet attention. He noted the guard positions, the blind spots in the lighting, the hum of the ship's core vibrating through the floor. He had been captured on purpose, and he was not alone. Deep in the lower decks, where maintenance tunnels twisted like veins through the ship's metal flesh, a woman moved in silence. Her name was Lila. She was young, with silver eyes that seemed to catch starlight even in darkness. Her dark hair was braided tightly, strands woven with tiny charms that glowed faintly when touched by her fingers. She wore a simple black suit lined with hidden pockets, each holding tools, powders, or folded runes. At her side, coiled like living shadow, was Ember, her dragon. Ember was no larger than a large dog, but his presence filled the narrow corridor. His scales shimmered between deep blue and violet, shifting with his mood. His wings were folded tight against his back, and his claws made no sound on the metal grating. He did not breathe fire like the dragons of old myths. Instead, his breath carried frequencies that could shatter glass, scramble circuits, or paralyze a nervous system. He was small but dangerous, and he was loyal only to Lila. They had followed the Iron Maw for 2 weeks, tracking it through asteroid fields and nebula storms. Lila had known Elias would be taken. She had seen it in the dream waves, the old visions that came to her when she slept near ancient Earth relics. Elias had left clues on the dead station, symbols only she would recognize. He wanted to be caught. He needed the Cathari to bring him aboard. Now, Lila pressed her palm against a wall panel. A soft hum answered her. She whispered a word in a language older than human cities, and the panel slid open just enough for her to slip through. Ember followed, his body low to the ground. They were inside the ship's inner ring, close to the observation pit. She could feel the crowd's energy above. Arrogant, loud, careless, she had trained for this. Elias had taught her everything. How to move without sound, how to read alien tech by its heat signature, how to weave wards from starlight and memory. He called her the Last Watcher, though she never understood why. All she knew was that Earth was not gone. It was sleeping, and someone had to wake it. Back in the pit, Vrax descended the steps, his heavy boots echoing. He stopped inches from Elias, towering over him. "You will speak," he demanded. "Tell us where your people hide, or we will peel your skin and hang it in our Hall of Triumphs." Elias looked up. His voice was quiet but clear. "My people don't hide." The Cathari laughed again, louder this time. One warrior slapped his tail against the railing. Another tossed a small bone trinket into the pit. It clattered near Elias's feet. "Then where are they?" Vrax sneered. "Rotting in graves your kind dug for yourselves." Elias did not answer right away. He glanced toward the ceiling, toward the vents where Lila now crouched, listening. Then he smiled. A small, tired smile, but one that held something sharp beneath it. "You think you're hunters," he said. "But you only chase what's already running." Vrax's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean, old meat?" Elias turned slightly, as if addressing the entire gallery. "You hunt the weak, the lost, the scared. You call that honor. But real hunters don't chase prey. They wait. They plan. They let the prey think it's safe, until it isn't. A murmur passed through the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably. The words were strange, but they carried weight. "You talk too much for a prisoner," Vrax snapped. He raised a clawed hand. "Silence him." 2 guards stepped forward. But before they could reach him, the lights flickered. A low groan echoed through the ship's frame. The gravity field stuttered just for a second, but it was enough. Several Cathari stumbled. Cups of dark liquid spilled from tables. Alarms chirped softly, then cut off. In the confusion, Elias did not move. He kept his eyes on the ceiling. Lila had done it. She had tapped into the ship's auxiliary power node and sent a pulse through the local gravity regulator. It wouldn't last long, maybe 30 seconds, but it was enough to create chaos. Enough to prove they were not helpless. Ember, hidden in a nearby duct, let out a soft chitter. Lila placed a hand on his head to calm him. Not yet, she thought. Not yet. Down in the pit, order returned quickly. The Cathari were disciplined, but the mood had shifted. The laughter was gone. Vrax stared at Elias with new suspicion. "You caused that?" he accused. Elias shrugged. "I'm just an old man in cuffs. How could I?" But Vrax wasn't fooled. He signaled to his second-in-command. "Double the guards. Scan him for implants, and lock down this sector." As the guards dragged Elias away to a holding cell, the old man glanced once more at the vent above. A silent message passed between them, seen only by Lila. She knew what came next. The Cathari would grow more cautious. They would search the ship. But they would not find her. She and Ember were ghosts, and ghosts do not leave footprints. In the cell, Elias sat on a narrow bench, the door sealed with a hiss. Outside, 2 guards stood watch. He closed his eyes not to sleep, but to listen. Far away, through layers of metal and silence, he heard the soft pad of Ember's claws. He heard Lila's breath steady and calm. They were close, and the real hunt was about to begin. The Cathari thought they had captured the last human. They thought they had won. But they did not understand. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not roar or charge. They waited. They learned. They turned traps into weapons. Elias smiled again, this time to himself. Let them laugh. Laughter ends when the hunter becomes the hunted. Above in the dark, Lila pressed her ear to the wall. She could hear the hum of the ship's core growing stronger. The Iron Maw was heading toward the Cathari homeworld. That meant they had what they came for, the core seed. The last piece of Earth's lost power. If it reached their capital, it would be dissected, copied, weaponized. Billions of sleeping humans would never wake. She touched a rune on her wrist. It glowed faintly, then faded. Ember nuzzled her hand. She nodded. Tonight they would strike, not to escape, but to take back what was stolen, and to remind the galaxy that humanity was not prey. They were apex hunters. The Iron Maw groaned as it cut through the dust lanes of the Andromeda Veil. Deep in its belly, in a narrow cell lined with damp metal walls, Elias sat with his back against the cold floor. His hands were still bound, but the cuffs had loosened slightly, just enough to let him work his fingers. He had been waiting, not for rescue, but for the right moment, and that moment was coming. Above him, in the ship's shadowed arteries, Lila moved like a whisper. Ember followed close, his scales dimmed to near black. They had spent hours mapping the patrol routes, counting guard shifts, learning the rhythm of the dreadnought's heartbeat. Lila knew every turn, every blind corner, every flicker in the lighting that meant a camera was offline. She had been trained for this, not by schools or armies, but by Elias himself in the ruins of old Earth beneath skies choked with memory. She pressed her palm against a wall panel. It opened with a soft sigh. Inside, wires pulsed with blue light. She reached in, fingers quick and sure, and pulled 2 strands free. She twisted them together, then whispered a short phrase. The lights in the corridor dimmed for 3 seconds, just long enough. Ember let out a low hum, his throat vibrating. Lila nodded. It was time. Down in the cell block, 2 Cathari guards stood watch. They spoke in low clicks, bored. One scratched at his scales. The other leaned against the wall, half asleep. They did not see the vent above them slide open. They did not hear the soft thud as Ember dropped down, silent as smoke. Before either could react, the dragon exhaled, a pulse of sound, too high for human ears, too sharp for Cathari nerves, ripped through the air. The guards clutched their heads, eyes wide with pain. They collapsed, twitching, their systems overloaded. Lila landed beside them, rolled one onto his side, and took his keyband from his wrist. She moved to Elias's cell. The door hissed open. Elias looked up, his eyes clear and calm. "You're late," he said. Had to wait for the shift change, Lila replied, kneeling to unlock his cuffs. Ember nudged Elias's hand with his snout. The old man smiled and scratched behind the dragon's ear. Good boy, they had no time for words. Alarms would sound soon. Layla pulled a small pouch from her belt and handed it to Elias. Inside were dried rations, a water capsule, and a folded map etched on thin foil. The core seed, Elias said quietly. Where is it, Cargo Bay Delta? Lila answered. Heavily guarded, shielded container. They think it's just a rock. Elias stood, stiff but steady. They don't know what it can do. Do you? Lila asked. He looked at her, his gaze heavy. Enough to know we can't let them keep it. They moved fast. Lila led the way, her steps light, her senses sharp. Ember stayed close to Elias, guarding his blind side. They passed through service tunnels, avoiding main corridors. Once, a patrol rounded a corner. Lila pulled them into a storage closet, holding her breath until the footsteps faded. As they neared Cargo Bay Delta, the air grew colder. Hums of containment fields buzzed through the walls. Lila signaled for silence. She peeked through a grate. Inside the bay, 4 elite Cathari stood around a cylindrical pod glowing faint green. The core seed rested inside, a smooth palm-sized stone veined with gold light. It pulsed slowly like a sleeping heart. We can't fight them, Lila whispered. We don't have to, Elias said. He pointed to a panel on the far wall. That's the gravity regulator for this section. If we overload it, the bay will go into emergency lockdown. Door seal, lights cut, systems reboot. 30 seconds of chaos. Lila nodded. She knew what to do. She turned to Ember. Sonic burst on my mark. Target the pod's shield emitter. Ember blinked once, his way of saying yes. Lila slipped into the bay through a floor hatch. She moved along the shadows, her body low. Elias stayed hidden near the entrance. When she was in position, she tapped her wrist. Ember let out a focused shriek, short, sharp, precise. The sound hit the shield emitter above the pod. Sparks flew. The green glow flickered. Alarms blared. The Cathari spun, weapons raised. But before they could react, Elias slammed his palm onto the regulator panel he'd reached by crawling through a coolant pipe. The lights died. Gravity stuttered. Crates floated. One guard crashed into a wall. Another fired wildly, his shot hitting the ceiling. In the confusion, Lila lunged. She grabbed the core seed just as the pod cracked open. It was warm in her hand, humming with a quiet power that made her bones vibrate. She tucked it into a shielded pouch and rolled behind a stack of crates. Go, Elias shouted. They ran. Ember led the way, his small form darting through gaps too narrow for Cathari. Lila followed, clutching the seed. Elias brought up the rear, limping but fast. They reached a maintenance shaft and climbed down into the lower decks. But the ship was awake now. Red lights flashed. Klaxons wailed. Vrax's voice boomed over the comms. Seal all exits. Find the thieves. Kill them on sight. They needed a ship. Fast. Lila remembered the scout bay near engineering. Small vessels, lightly guarded. If they could reach one, they might escape before the Iron Maw raised its shields. They moved through dripping corridors, past steaming pipes and humming reactors. Twice they hid as patrols passed. Ember's scales shifted to match the rusted metal around them, making him nearly invisible. Lila's breath came fast, but her hands were steady. She had trained for this moment her whole life. Finally, they reached the scout bay. 3 small ships sat in docking cradles. One was prepped for launch, fuel full, systems hot. Probably meant for a messenger. That one, Elias said, pointing. They sprinted across the open floor. Just as they reached the ramp, a Cathari guard stepped out from behind a console. He raised his rifle. Ember didn't hesitate. He leapt jaws wide and bit down on the guard's wrist. The rifle clattered to the floor. Lila kicked it away and shoved the guard into a wall. He slumped, dazed. They boarded the scout ship. Elias dropped into the pilot seat. His fingers flew over the controls, old reflexes returning. Lila strapped in behind him, the core seed safe in her lap. Ember curled at her feet, panting. Hold on, Elias said. The ship lifted with a roar. Alarms blared outside. Turret guns swiveled toward them. But Elias was already punching in coordinates. The bay doors groaned open. Stars rushed in. They shot into space just as plasma bolts lit the void behind them. The Iron Maw loomed large, angry, wounded. Vrax would not let them go easily. Once clear, Elias leaned back, breathing hard. Where to now? Lila looked at the core seed. It glowed softly through the pouch. The hollow moon, she said. You told me about it. The vault. Elias nodded slowly. It's the only place we can wake the others. Others, Lila asked. The sleeper colonies, he said. Scattered across the rim, hidden in ice rock dust, waiting for the signal. The core seed can send it, but only from the vault. It's keyed to Earth's old network. Lila understood. The core seed wasn't just a relic. It was a key, and the vault was the lock. But the hollow moon was dangerous. It orbited a gas giant racked by storms. Its surface was littered with wrecks and traps. And worse, it was crawling with Cathari scouts. They used it as a forward base. They'll be waiting for us, she said. Then we'll give them a surprise, Elias replied, a tired smile on his lips. As the scout ship jumped to low warp, Lila looked out at the stars. She thought of the stories Elias had told her, of cities that flew, of forests grown in space, of humans who walked among stars like gods. She had always thought they were myths, but holding the core seed, feeling its quiet pulse, she knew they were real, and they were waking up. Ember rested his head on her knee. She stroked his scales. Outside, the void stretched endless and cold, but for the first time in years, Lila felt hope. They had the seed, they had the ship, and they had each other. The Cathari had laughed at an old man in chains. Soon they would learn what happened when apex hunters struck back. The scout ship dropped out of warp near the gas giant Krylos. Ahead, hanging in the planet's violet shadow, was the hollow moon, a dead rock pockmarked with craters and wrecks. Its surface shimmered with strange energy, left over from wars no one remembered. Storms of charged dust swirled in its thin atmosphere, crackling with static. It was a graveyard of ships and secrets. Lila sat in the co-pilot seat, eyes fixed on the scanners. Red dots blinked across the screen, Cathari patrol ships orbiting in pairs. More were on the surface. They had expected this. The hollow moon was too valuable to leave unguarded. It sat on the edge of Cathari space, perfect for watching the outer rim. Elias adjusted the ship's shield frequency, lowering its heat signature. "We go in quiet," he said. "No weapons, no comms, just us in the dark." Ember lay curled behind them, his scales dimmed to gray. He sensed the danger. His tail twitched and his eyes glowed faintly blue. They waited until a solar flare erupted from Krylos. The burst of radiation blinded sensors for 12 seconds. That was their window. Elias pushed the throttle. The ship dove toward the moon, engines muted, hull cold. They skimmed over jagged peaks and frozen canyons, staying low. Twice Cathari scouts passed overhead, but the flare hid them. They landed in a collapsed hangar buried under a landslide of black rock. The ramp lowered with a hiss. Cold air rushed in, sharp with metal and ozone. Lila stepped out first, the core seed secured in a chest pouch. Ember followed, sniffing the air. Elias came last, leaning on a metal cane he'd taken from the ship. "The vault is half a mile east," he said, pointing to a ridge lined with broken towers, built into the old observatory. "But the entrance is sealed. Only an apex hunter can open it." "How?" Lila asked. "With blood and memory," he replied. "Yours," she didn't argue. She had known this day would come. Since she was a child, Elias had told her she was different, not just human, something more. A bridge between what was and what could be. They moved fast, sticking to shadows. The moon was silent except for the wind howling through wrecked hulls. Bones of old ships jutted from the ground like ribs. Some were human, most were not. The Cathari had been using this place for decades, turning it into a hunting ground for captured species. As they neared the ridge, Lila spotted movement. 2 Cathari scouts stood near the observatory entrance, rifles slung over their shoulders. They were talking, relaxed. They didn't expect trouble. Ember crouched low. Lila signaled him to wait. She pulled a small vial from her belt, filled with powdered iron and crushed moonstone. She whispered over it, then tossed it into the wind. The powder swirled, catching the light just right. The scouts turned, distracted by the glitter. In that moment, Ember struck. He darted forward, silent and fast. One scout fell before he could cry out. The other spun, but Lila was already on him. She drove her elbow into his throat, then twisted his rifle away. He collapsed, gasping. They dragged the bodies behind a wreck and covered them with scrap metal. No time for burial. No time for noise. The observatory loomed ahead, a dome of cracked glass and rusted steel. Vines of frozen wire crawled up its sides. The entrance was a circular door, sealed with a symbol that looked like a human eye inside a circle of stars. Elias placed his hand on it. Nothing happened. "It's not for you," Lila said softly. She stepped forward. She pressed her palm to the symbol. It was cold. Then she pricked her finger with a small blade and let a drop of blood fall onto the metal. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the ground trembled. The symbol glowed red. Gears groaned deep underground. The door slid open, revealing a dark stairwell that spiraled down. "Go," Elias said. "I'll watch the entrance." Lila nodded. Ember stayed with her. They descended into the earth. The air grew warmer as they went deeper. Walls were lined with old panels covered in human script, some in English, some in languages long dead. Lights flickered on as they passed, powered by something ancient and steady. At the bottom, they found a chamber. It was round with a high ceiling. In the center stood a pedestal shaped like a tree root. Around it, rows of dormant drones sat in stasis pods, humanoid machines with smooth faces and empty eyes. These were the Guardians, the last defense of the sleeper colonies. On the pedestal rested a slot, the size of the core seed. Lila took the seed from her pouch. It pulsed brighter as she neared. She placed it into the slot. Light exploded through the chamber. The walls lit up with maps, thousands of them showing stars, planets, hidden bases. A voice echoed, calm and clear, speaking in Old Earth English. Apex protocol activated. Beacon ready. Confirm activation. Lila looked at Ember. He blinked slowly. She took a breath. Confirm, she said. The beacon fired, not with sound or light, but with a signal that traveled faster than thought. It shot through subspace, reaching every hidden human colony, every sleeper ship buried in ice or rock. Across the galaxy, machines woke. Engines hummed. Doors opened. People stirred from centuries of sleep. But the signal did something else too. It woke the drones. One by one, the stasis pods hissed open. The Guardians stepped out, their eyes glowing soft blue. They turned to Lila and knelt. She was their commander now. Above, Elias heard the distant roar of engines. He looked up. 3 Cathari gunships descended from orbit, weapons hot. Vrax had found them. He keyed his comm. "Lila, they're coming!" "You have 5 minutes." Down below, Lila knew what she had to do. She pulled the core seed from the pedestal. The light dimmed, but the signal was already sent. The drones formed a line behind her. "Guard the vault," she told them. "Let no one take it." She and Ember ran back up the stairs. Outside, chaos had begun. Plasma fire lit the sky. Vrax stood on the lead gunship's ramp, roaring orders. Cathari warriors poured onto the ridge, weapons raised. Elias stood alone in front of the observatory door, his cane held like a staff. "You again," Vrax snarled, leaping down. "You think hiding in holes makes you strong? I don't need to be strong," Elias said. "I just need to be enough," Vrax charged. But before he could reach him, Lila and Ember burst from the door. The drones followed, moving fast, silent, deadly. They met the Cathari warriors in a clash of steel and energy. Lila ran to Elias. "We have to go," he shook his head. "No. This is my place now." "What?" she said. "The vault must stay hidden. If they follow us, they'll find it. I stay. I hold them here. You'll die," she said. "Maybe," he replied. "But you'll live. And you'll wake the rest." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't argue. She knew he was right. She hugged him quickly. Ember nuzzled his hand. "Go," Elias said. "And remember, humans don't run from hunters. We become the storm they never see coming." Lila turned and ran toward their ship, Ember at her side. Behind them, Elias faced Vrax and the charging horde. He raised his cane. The drones formed a wall of steel. As Lila reached the scout ship, she looked back one last time. The observatory glowed with power. Elias stood tall even as fire rained around him. She launched the ship just as the first explosion rocked the ridge. The hollow moon shook. Dust and fire filled the sky. In orbit, she watched the surface burn. The Cathari gunships turned toward her, but she was already jumping to warp. In her hand, the core seed hummed warmly. The signal was out. The colonies were waking, and Elias's sacrifice would not be forgotten. Somewhere in the dark, other apex hunters were rising. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not gone. It was returning. Weeks passed. The scout ship drifted through the outer rim, hiding in asteroid clouds and dead nebulae. Lila had changed. Her eyes were harder, her movements quicker. She no longer slept more than a few hours at a time. Ember stayed close, his scales now a deep indigo, his color for grief and readiness. He missed Elias too. But they had work to do. The beacon signal had done its job. Across the galaxy, human sleeper colonies were waking. Old ships powered up. Hidden bases opened their doors. People who had slept for centuries stepped into the light. confused but armed. They remembered the old stories. They remembered the Cathari. And they were angry. Lila received coded messages on frequencies only apex hunters knew. One came from a moon near Sirius. Humans there had taken back a Cathari outpost. Another from the Orion Veil. Sleeper drones had disabled a hunter fleet without firing a shot. Humanity was not returning quietly. It was striking back, but Vrax was not done. He had survived the hollow moon. Furious and humiliated, he gathered his best hunters and set a trap. He knew Lila would come for the core seed's next step, planting it on a dead world to begin the great reawakening. He chose Proxima Haven. Once Proxima Haven had been a garden world. Humans built cities under glass domes, grew forests in orbital rings, and sang songs to the stars. Then the Cathari came. They burned the domes, poisoned the soil, and turned the planet into a trophy ground. Now it was a ruin, ash-covered, silent, haunted. Vrax spread word that he would execute captured humans there live for the galaxy to see. He wanted Lila to come. He wanted her to watch. He wanted to break her. Lila knew it was a trap, but she also knew she had to go. Proxima Haven was the first world that needed the core seed. If she could plant it in the heart of the old capital, life would return. Trees would grow through ash. Rivers would run clean again. And from that rebirth, humanity's new fleet would rise. She prepped the ship, loaded extra rations, checked Ember's sonic nodes, and wrapped the core seed in 3 layers of shielding. Then she set course for Proxima Haven. When they arrived, the planet looked like a wound. Gray clouds hung low. The oceans were black. The ruins of the capital city, once called New Hope, stood like broken teeth against the sky. And in the center of it all, in the shadow of a shattered cathedral, Vrax waited. He had built a stage of bone and metal. Captured humans stood in cages around it. Men, women, even children, all thin and bruised but defiant. Vrax paced before them, his armor polished, his voice loud over the wind. "Where is she?" he shouted to the empty sky. "The girl with the dragon. The thief of the seed, come out. Watch your people die." Lila watched from orbit. Her hands gripped the controls. She could leave. She could wait. But the people in those cages were counting on her. And the core seed needed this world. "Ready?" she asked Ember. He stood on the co-pilot seat, wings half spread. He let out a low hum, his sound for yes. She took a deep breath and guided the ship down. She landed not in the city, but in the old botanical ruins on the edge of town. Vines of dead metal curled around broken greenhouses. She moved on foot, keeping to the rubble. Ember flew low, hidden by smoke from burning trash pits. As she neared the cathedral, she saw them, hundreds of humans emerging from the ruins. Not just the captives, others. Sleeper colonists who had arrived in secret ships. They wore patched armor, carried old rifles, and moved with quiet purpose. They had come not to be saved, but to fight. Lila met their leader near a collapsed fountain. Her name was Maya, tall and scarred with eyes that had seen too much. She nodded when she saw Lila. "We heard the signal," Maya said. "We've been waiting." "Vrax thinks he's hunting me," Lila said. "He's hunting all of us," Maya replied. "But today he's the prey." They made a plan. While Lila drew Vrax's attention, the others would free the captives and take the high ground. Ember would disable the Cathari comms with a sonic pulse, and Lila would plant the core seed in the cathedral's foundation, the old heart of the city. As night fell, Lila walked into the open. She stood at the edge of the stage, the core seed glowing softly in her hand. Vrax turned, his eyes wide with rage and triumph. "You came," he hissed. "Alone. Foolish." "I'm not alone," Lila said. At that moment, Ember screamed from above. The sound shattered every comms unit in the area. Cathari guards clutched their ears, disoriented. From the ruins, humans surged forward, silent, fast, furious. They overwhelmed the guards, freed the captives, and took position on rooftops with rifles and old plasma casters. Vrax roared and charged Lila, but she did not run. She stood her ground. "You think you won?" he spat, stopping just feet away. "You think one girl and her pet can stop an empire?" Lila looked past him at the humans now surrounding the square, at the children being led to safety, at the old man who raised a broken pipe like a sword, at Maya, aiming a rifle from a broken window. "We already have," Lila said. She turned and ran toward the cathedral. Vrax followed, bellowing orders. But his warriors were fighting for their lives. The humans fought not with fancy weapons, but with rage and memory. They knew these streets. They knew how to use the ruins. A Cathari fell into a hidden basement. Another was tripped by a wire strung between poles. A third was dragged into an alley by hands that remembered how to kill quietly. Lila reached the cathedral's altar. The floor was cracked, but the old earth symbol was still there, a circle with a tree inside. She knelt and placed the core seed into the center. It sank into the stone. Light spread through the cracks. Green shoots pushed through the ash. The air grew warmer, cleaner. Vrax reached her then. He grabbed her by the collar, lifting her off the ground. "You ruined everything," he snarled. Lila looked him in the eye. "No, we're fixing it." Behind him, Maya fired. The shot hit Vrax in the shoulder. He dropped Lila and spun, roaring. But more shots came. From windows, from alleys, from the bell tower. Vrax staggered, bleeding, confused. He had expected a hunt. He got a reckoning. Lila stood, breathing hard. Ember landed beside her, wings flared. The first rain in 100 years began to fall. Soft, clean, real. Vrax fell to his knees. His warriors were gone or captured. His fleet, waiting in orbit, received no orders. They turned and fled. The humans gathered in the square. They did not cheer. They stood quiet, watching the rain wash the ash from their faces. Lila walked to Vrax. He looked up at her, defeated. "What now?" he asked. "Now you learn," she said. "You learn that humans don't just survive. We return, we rebuild, we remember." She left him there in the rain as the first green sprout broke through the stone at his feet. The war was not over, but the galaxy now knew the truth. Humanity was awake, and apex hunters do not forgive. The battle for Proxima Haven lasted 3 days, not because the Cathari fought well, but because the humans refused to rush. They cleared every street, every ruin, every hidden bunker with care. They freed prisoners, buried their dead, and marked the names of the lost on the walls of the old cathedral. Lila walked among them, the core seed now rooted deep in the planet's heart. Wherever she stepped, green returned. Moss climbed broken walls. Flowers pushed through cracked pavement. The air smelled of rain and soil, not ash. Ember stayed close, his scales shifting to soft green, his color for peace and growth. He no longer growled at shadows. The fight was over for now. Vrax sat in chains near the fountain, guarded by 2 young humans who barely looked old enough to hold rifles. He watched the world heal around him and said nothing. Shame was a new feeling for him. He had been taught that strength meant domination. But here, strength looked like a woman planting seeds in poisoned ground. It looked like children laughing under clean rain. It looked like enemies choosing mercy over revenge. On the 3rd night, the Cathari High Council sent a message. Not a threat. Not a challenge. A request. They asked for terms. Lila stood on the cathedral spire, wrapped in a simple gray cloak. Below, the city glowed with lanterns. Humans from a dozen sleeper colonies gathered in the square, some in old uniforms, some in patched rags, all with the same quiet fire in their eyes. Maya stood at the front, arms crossed, watching the sky. A comms drone hovered before Lila. It carried the council's voice, thin and strained. "We ask for peace," it said. "Name your price." Lila did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply spoke, her voice clear and calm, carried by hidden speakers across the city and up to orbit. "You hunted us. You called us prey. You laughed at our old and broke our worlds. Now you ask for peace," she paused. The crowd below was silent. "Peace is not given. It is earned. Leave our systems. Return what you stole. And never hunt a human again." The drone blinked once, and if we refuse, Lila looked out at the stars. "Then you will learn why the galaxy once feared the name human." The drone vanished. The message was sent. Down in the square, Maya turned to the others. "They'll think about it," she said. "But they'll agree. They saw what we did here. They saw what we are." Lila climbed down from the spire. Ember met her at the base, nudging her hand. She scratched behind his ears and walked toward the center of the city. There, in a newly cleared plaza, the humans had built a memorial. Not of stone, but of living wood. Carved into its surface were names: Elias. Others lost on the Iron Maw. Those who died in the sleeper ships. Those who never woke. She placed her hand on Elias's name. It was warm. "We did it," she whispered. That night she stood alone on the edge of the city, looking up at the stars. The core seed's work was spreading. Forests grew in domes. Rivers ran clear. But more than that, ships were coming. From the Orion Veil, from the Sirius cluster, from the dark between galaxies. Human vessels, old and new, armed and ready, were gathering. They were not an empire. They were a family waking from a long sleep. And they remembered who they were. In the weeks that followed, Lila trained the new hunters, not just to fight but to protect, to listen, to wait. She taught them the old ways Elias had shown her, how to read the wind, how to move without sound, how to turn fear into focus. Ember helped, his presence calming even the most restless recruits. They called him the Stormheart, for he carried both fury and peace in his breath. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Proxima Haven, Maya found Lila by the river. "What now?" Maya asked. Lila watched the water flow, clear and strong. "Now we rebuild. Not just cities, not just ships, trust, hope, the things they tried to burn out of us. And the Cathari, they'll watch. They'll wait. And if they hunt again, we'll be ready." Maya nodded. "You're not just a watcher anymore, are you?" Lila smiled faintly. "No, I'm a hunter. Like Elias, like all of us." Far above, in orbit, the first human fleet assembled, not with banners or war cries, but with quiet purpose. They scanned the stars, not for enemies, but for lost brothers and sisters, for sleeper ships still drifting in the dark, for worlds that needed the core seed's touch. And Lila knew this was only the beginning. One morning, as dawn painted the sky in gold and rose, she stood on the highest hill outside the city. Ember coiled at her feet. Below, children played in new grass. Farmers planted seeds in clean soil. Builders raised walls from reclaimed stone. It was not the old Earth. But it was something new, something strong. A ship landed on the edge of the field. Not a war vessel, a scout. Its ramp lowered and an old woman stepped out. Her face lined with time, her eyes bright with wonder. She looked at the green fields, the clean air, the people walking free. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are we home?" Lila walked down the hill to meet her. "Yes," she said. "We're home." As the days passed, more ships came. Each one carried stories of survival, of hiding, of waiting. Each one added to the growing light of humanity's return. And high on the hill, Lila and Ember watched the stars, not with fear, but with promise. The galaxy had laughed at an old man in chains. Now, it would learn to respect the silence before the storm, because humans were not prey. They were apex hunters, and they were just getting started.